Why do you need the keys to my husband's house? My daughter-in-law, Nicole, threw that question at me that afternoon as I desperately rummaged through my purse trying to find my keys. We were in the living room of my son Michael's house, and I had only gone for a quick visit, as I always did on Tuesday afternoons. But that day, something had changed in her eyes. There was a new coldness, a distance I hadn't noticed before, or maybe I had noticed it, but preferred to ignore it, like mothers do when we don't want to see the obvious. I froze, my hand still inside my purse, feeling my fingers touch every object, searching for those darn keys that I swore I had put there that very morning. The tone of her voice was not rude, it wasn't a shout, it was something worse. It was that icy calm, that way of pronouncing every word as if she were explaining something to a silly child who doesn't understand the basic rules of cohabitation. I just can't find them, Nicole. I always leave them in this side pocket. But they're not there today, I replied, trying to maintain my composure, trying not to show the humiliation that was already beginning to climb up my throat like a tight knot. She was standing next to the living room window, her arms crossed over her chest, watching me with that look I had learned to recognize over the last few months. It wasn't open hostility. It was something more subtle, more dangerous. It was as if she was studying me, evaluating my every move to find a flaw, an error that would justify what she clearly already thought of me. Frances. She used my full name. She never called me mum or mother-in-law, always Frances, creating that formal distance that hurt more than any direct insult. I think you should ask yourself why you really need to have permanent access to this house. Michael and I are a family now. We have our privacy, our moments. It's not healthy for you to come and go as you please. I felt the air grow heavier in that room. The same room where I had helped Michael paint the walls 3 years ago, where we had assembled every piece of furniture together, where I had personally hung those beige curtains that Nicole now looked at with disdain every time she visited, saying they were too old-fashioned for her style. Nicole, I don't come and go as I please. I always ring the doorbell. I always call before I come over. The keys are just for emergencies. You know that. I tried to explain, feeling my voice sound weaker than I would have liked, more defensive. Emergencies? She repeated, and let out a brief, dry, humorless laugh. What kind of emergencies, Frances? Like coming to check if we cleaned the kitchen properly? Like coming in to water your plants that you insist on leaving here, even though I've told you 1,000 times I don't like having so many plants in the house? Every word was an accusation disguised as a question. Every sentence was a reminder that I was being judged, measured, and found lacking in every aspect. And the worst part was that she had this terrible ability to make everything sound reasonable, to present her complaints as the legitimate concerns of a wife who just wants to protect her marriage. I swallowed and kept searching through my purse, even though I already knew the keys weren't there. I checked the main compartment again, the side pockets, even the small zippered space where I kept my identification. Nothing. My entire keychain had disappeared, the one with that little silver heart charm that Michael had given me for my 60th birthday. Look, I don't know where they are. Maybe I left them at home without realizing it. I lied, because I knew perfectly well that I had brought them. I remembered the feel of them in my hand perfectly when I locked the door to my apartment that afternoon. Could you lend me your set of keys to make a copy? I promise to give them back to you tomorrow. Nicole then approached, walking slowly toward where I was, and I could see her lips curve into something that was meant to be a sympathetic smile, but which seemed more like a grimace of contained triumph. Frances, I think this is a sign that maybe it's time for you to redefine your relationship with this house, with us. Michael isn't a boy anymore. He doesn't need his mum coming over every couple of days to check on him. He has a wife now, he has responsibilities, he has a life to build with me. There it was again. That way of talking that turned every comment into a life lesson, as if I were a senile old woman, incapable of understanding the appropriate boundaries between a mother and her adult son, as if my 62 years hadn't taught me anything about respect, about family, about love. I understand that Michael has his own life, Nicole. I always have understood that. But I'm still his mother, and this house is important to me too. I don't come to police or to bother. I come because I like spending time with my son, seeing him, knowing that he's okay. Well, Michael is perfectly fine, she replied dryly. He's better than ever, in fact. Ever since we established some clearer boundaries with visits, he's been more relaxed, more focused on us as a couple. You don't realize it, Francis, but sometimes your constant presence creates tension. He doesn't tell you because he doesn't want to hurt you, but as his wife, I can see it. That was a punch to the gut. The insinuation that my own son felt burdened by me, that my motherly love was actually a burden he tolerated out of pity or obligation. Nicole knew exactly where to strike to cause the most damage, and she did it with that soft, almost maternal voice, as if she were doing me a favor by opening my eyes to a painful truth. If Michael felt that way, he would tell me, I replied, though my voice trembled slightly. We've always had open communication, ever since he was a child. Oh, really? And when was the last time you two had a real conversation, just the two of you without me present? When was the last time Michael sought you out on his own initiative, and not because you showed up here? I couldn't answer that. Nicole had touched a wound that I myself had been ignoring for months. It was true that lately I was always the one who called first, who suggested the visits, who asked if I could stop by to see them. Michael no longer showed up on Sunday mornings with donuts and coffee like he used to before he got married. He no longer called me just to tell me about his day or to ask for advice about a problem at work. Look, Francis, Nicole continued, and this time her voice adopted an almost compassionate tone that was even more unbearable than her previous coldness. I don't want to be the villain in this story. I really don't. I know you raised Michael alone after your husband passed away. I know you made a lot of sacrifices for him, and that's admirable. But now he's 25 years old. He has a wife, and he needs space to grow as a man, to build his own family without feeling like he has to worry about you all the time. I have never asked him to worry about me, I protested, feeling indignation starting to replace the sadness in my chest. I have my own life, my job, my friends. I'm not some dependent old lady who has nothing better to do than bother her son. Then prove it, she challenged me, taking another step closer. Prove it by letting him live without showing up here every Tuesday and every Friday. Prove it by not calling him 3 times a day to ask if he ate lunch or if he has clean clothes. Prove it by accepting that you are no longer the most important woman in his life. I am now. There it was. She had finally said out loud what she had been implying for months with her gestures, her looks, her seemingly innocent comments. This wasn't about the keys. It had never been about the keys. This was about power, about territory, about who had the right to love Michael and in what way. I remained silent, staring at her, trying to process what I had just heard. Nicole held my gaze without blinking, with the absolute confidence of someone who knows they hold all the cards. She slept next to my son every night. She shared his daily life. She had access to his most intimate thoughts. And me. I was just the mother who lived 20 minutes away, waiting for my scraps of attention. I think I'd better go, I finally said, closing my purse with trembling hands. When I find my keys, I'll let you know. Francis, wait, she called out as I was already walking toward the door. Don't leave angry. I just want you to understand the situation. We can have a good relationship, you and I, but with clear boundaries. I'm not your enemy. I turned around to look at her one last time before leaving. She was standing there in the middle of the living room, in the house I had helped them get, surrounded by the furniture I had helped pay for when Michael was just starting his job and didn't have enough savings. And she spoke to me about boundaries, about respect, about personal space, as if I were an intruder and not the woman who had given everything for the son she was now claiming as exclusively hers. "You're right, Nicole," I told her with a calm that surprised even me. "You're not my enemy, and I'm not yours either. But if you ever have children, you'll understand that a mother's love can't be limited as easily as you think. Goodbye." I left that house feeling a weight in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. I walked to my car parked on the street. I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat without turning the engine on. My hands were trembling so much that I had to press them against my legs to control them. I took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3 times, trying not to cry right there in the middle of the street where any neighbor could see me. How had I reached this point? When exactly had my relationship with Michael changed so much? I tried to recall the precise moment, the specific conversation, the incident that had marked the before and after, but I couldn't find it. It had been a gradual process, so slow that I hadn't noticed it until it was too late. I remembered when Michael introduced me to Nicole 2 years ago. It had been at an Italian restaurant, one of those small, cozy places where they serve pasta in generous portions. She had arrived holding his hand, smiling, friendly, asking me about my job as a secretary at an accounting firm. I had thought she was a nice girl, maybe a little reserved, but nothing that would make me suspect what was to come. "Mom, I'm so happy," Michael had told me that night, with that light in his eyes that men have when they are deeply in love. "Nicole is special. She's different from all the girls I've met. I think she's the one." And I had been happy for him, genuinely happy. I had toasted with cheap wine and hugged that girl I barely knew, wishing her the best, hoping she would make my son happy. How naive I had been. I hadn't seen the signs, the small manipulation that Nicole had already begun to weave with the patience of a spider building its web. At first, they had been subtle things. A comment about how late I called at night, suggesting that Michael needed to rest for his work. An observation about how much I cooked for him, insinuating that it made him feel guilty for not visiting me more often. A casual mention about how important it was for young couples to have time alone without outside interference. I had ignored those signs because I didn't want to be that nosy, paranoid mother-in-law that everyone makes fun of. I didn't want to become the stereotype of the possessive mother who can't let go of her son. So I had taken steps back. I had reduced my calls. I had waited for Michael to seek me out instead of seeking him out first. And Michael, my sweet Michael, had also started to pull away. Not dramatically, not with a conversation where he told me he needed space. Simply his calls became less frequent, his visits shorter, his hugs more rushed. And when I asked him if everything was all right, he would answer with a tired smile that no longer told me anything, because the words that came out of his mouth were generic and empty. "Everything's perfect, Mum. I'm just really busy with work." "I'm fine, Ma. Don't worry so much. Nicole sends her love. She says we should organize a dinner soon." Empty promises, superficial conversations, that distance that kept growing without either of us having the courage to talk about it directly. And I had resigned myself. I had convinced myself that this was how things were when sons got married, that it was natural for them to prioritize their wives over their mothers. But now, sitting in my car in front of my son's house, with Nicole's words still ringing in my ears, I realized that there was something profoundly wrong with all of this. It wasn't natural for a wife to see her husband's mother as a threat. It wasn't normal for me to have to implicitly ask permission to see my own son. It wasn't fair for them to make me feel guilty for the love I felt for the human being I had brought into the world and raised alone. I turned on the car engine and drove toward my apartment on autopilot, not really paying attention to the streets I was passing. I arrived at my apartment just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that on any other day I would have found beautiful. But that afternoon, everything seemed grey, dull, lifeless. I went up the stairs to the third floor where my small two-bedroom apartment was, that space that had been my refuge for the last 10 years, ever since Michael moved out to go to college. I opened the door, and the first thing I did was search every possible place where I might have left my keys. I checked the entrance table, the kitchen, my bedroom, even under the sofa. Nothing. I knew I wouldn't find them because I was absolutely certain I had brought them with me that afternoon. I remembered them perfectly, the familiar weight of the keychain in my hand when I left the house. I sat down on the living room sofa, that old brown fabric couch I had bought second-hand when Michael was 10 and that had accompanied me through so many difficult times. I closed my eyes and let the memories come, those memories that I had been avoiding because they hurt too much. I remembered when I bought that house for Michael. It had been 3 years ago, when he was 22 and had just landed his first stable job as an administrative assistant at a technology company. The salary wasn't bad, but it wasn't enough to buy property in the city either. I had been saving for years, putting away every extra dollar I earned, sacrificing vacations and personal indulgences. I had scraped together $25,000 for the down payment on a small house in a decent neighborhood, not luxurious, but safe and with good access to public transportation. I found a perfect property, a 2-story, 3-bedroom house with a small backyard and enough space for Michael to grow, to start a family someday. The total price was $85,000, and I handled all the negotiation with the bank for the mortgage loan. But here came the part Nicole didn't know, the part I had kept secret for reasons I was now beginning to understand better. When we did the purchase paperwork, I put the property in my name, not Michael's, but mine. I told him it was for ease of dealing with the bank, that his credit history was still very short, and that it would be simpler if I appeared as the main buyer. But it's your house, son, I had told him that day when we signed the papers. I'm just helping you with the paperwork. You pay for it every month with your job, you take care of it, you live in it. It's yours. And he had hugged me with tears in his eyes, thanking me for being the best mother in the world, promising me that one day he would repay everything I had done for him. I had stroked his hair like when he was a child, and told him that he didn't owe me anything, that seeing him happy was payment enough. For the first 2 years, Michael religiously paid the monthly loan installment, which was $650. Every month he would transfer the money to my account, and I would take care of making the payment to the bank. It was an arrangement that worked perfectly. He had his independence, his own space, and I had the peace of mind knowing that my son was well situated. But then Nicole arrived. She moved in with him 6 months after they started dating, and from that moment on, things started to change. She began to decorate the house to her taste, buying new furniture, changing curtains, and painting walls. And with every change she made, her sense of ownership over that place grew stronger. I got up from the sofa and walked to my bedroom, where I kept all my important documents in a safety box inside the closet. I took out the box, dialed the combination on the lock, and opened it. There they were, organized in different colored folders, my birth certificate, my high school diploma, the property deed for Michael's house. I took the green folder containing the house documents and opened it on my bed. I slowly flipped through the pages, reading every clause, every legal term, confirming what I already knew. The house was in my name. Francis Rodriguez was the legal owner registered with the county. Michael appeared in some documents as the occupant and responsible for the payment, but legally, the property was mine. I had never intended to use this against him. I had never even considered mentioning this detail because for me it was irrelevant. I had bought that house for my son, and in my mind, it was always his no matter what the papers said. But now, after the conversation with Nicole, after hearing her say with such certainty that it was my husband's house, something had changed inside me. It wasn't revenge I was feeling, not exactly. It was more like an awakening, a sudden clarity about the real situation. Nicole had treated me like an intruder in a house that wasn't even legally hers or Michael's. She had talked to me about boundaries and respect while living in a property I had bought with the sweat of my brow, with years of saving and sacrifice. I put the documents back in the box and carefully closed it. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with that information, but something told me it was going to be important to have it on hand. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had some power in this situation that had become so unbalanced. That night, I barely slept. I stayed awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the small humiliations I had endured from Nicole over the last few months. The comments about my clothes being too old-fashioned, her suggestions that I should find new hobbies appropriate for my age, the way she always found an excuse to cut my visits short. I remembered the day of her wedding to Michael, 1 year ago. It had been a small ceremony in the backyard of the house, because they had decided they didn't want to spend a lot of money on a big party. I had contributed $3,000 to help with the costs, money I had taken from my emergency savings without a second thought, because I wanted my son to have a special day. But throughout the entire celebration, Nicole had barely spoken to me. She had been busy attending to her friends, her parents who had come from out of state, Michael's co-workers. I had sat in a corner of the garden, smiling for photos when asked, feeling like just another guest instead of the groom's mother. And when it came time for the traditional mother-son dance, Nicole had suggested they do a group dance with all the guests to break with old traditions and create more inclusive moments. Michael had agreed, looking at me with a timid apology in his eyes that I had accepted with a smile because I didn't want to ruin his day. But that night, when I returned alone to my apartment after the wedding, I had cried for hours. I had cried for that dance we never had, for that tradition I had dreamed of since Michael was a little boy and was stepping on my feet while I taught him to dance in our old living room. I had cried because I realized I was losing my son little by little, and I didn't know how to stop it. The phone rang at 11 o'clock at night, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Michael. My heart leapt with hope, thinking that maybe he had noticed my distress that afternoon, that maybe he was going to ask if I was okay, to apologize for Nicole's behavior. "Mom?" His voice sounded tired on the other end of the line. "Nicole told me what happened today with the keys." "Oh, yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I lost them, but a spare set I had saved has already turned up." I lied, because I didn't want to worry him, because I still had that habit of protecting him from unpleasant things. "Look, Ma, I know sometimes Nicole can be a little direct with the things she says, but she's right about some things." I remained silent as I heard those words coming from my son's mouth. She's right about some things. As if Nicole were the voice of reason and I was the one who was wrong, the one who needed correction, the one who didn't understand how adult relationships worked. "What things is she right about, Michael?" I asked, and this time I couldn't hide the pain in my voice. "That I shouldn't have keys to your house? That I bother you too much? That my motherly love is a burden to you?" "Mum, don't put words in my mouth," he replied with a sigh of frustration. "Nicole didn't say that exactly. She's just trying to establish healthy boundaries for our marriage. All the books we've read about relationships say it's important for couples to have their private space without family interference. Books? I repeated in disbelief. Now you need to read books to know how to treat your own mother. Michael, I raised you alone for 25 years. Your father died when you were 4 years old, and I was left with nothing but my secretary job and the determination to give you a good life. I never treated you like a burden. I never made you feel like you were in my way. And now it turns out that I'm the one in your way. It's not like that, Mum. You're exaggerating things. Nicole just wants us to have a more mature, more adult relationship. I'm not a kid who needs his mum coming to take care of him all the time. And when have I acted like you're a child? My voice was rising now, the accumulated frustration of months finally finding an outlet. When have I treated you disrespectfully, or as if you couldn't take care of yourself? I just come to visit you, Michael. I just want to see my son, spend time with him, know that he's okay. Is that so terrible? Is that so invasive? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Michael's breathing. I could imagine him sitting on his living room sofa, probably with Nicole next to him, listening to every word of our conversation, guiding him on what to say, how to respond. Mum, I love you very much. You know that. But I need you to understand that my life changed. I have a wife now. I have responsibilities to her too. I can't always be available for you like before. I have never asked you to be always available, I replied, feeling tears begin to well up in my eyes. I just ask you not to treat me like a stranger, not to let your wife disrespect me in your own house, to remember that I am also part of your life. Nicole didn't disrespect you. She was just honest with you about how she feels. That's what mature people do, Mum. They talk things out directly instead of holding on to resentments. There it was again, that word, mature. As if I were a spoiled teenager who couldn't handle an adult conversation. As if my hurt feelings were proof of my immaturity instead of a normal response to mistreatment. All right, Michael, I finally said, wiping the tears with the back of my hand. I get the message. I'm going to give you the space you need. I won't bother you anymore with my inopportune visits. Mum, you don't have to be like that. Nobody is saying you can't come visit us. We're just asking you to call ahead with more notice, to respect our schedule, to understand that sometimes we're going to be busy and won't be able to see you. I always call before I go, Michael. I always call or send a text. But it seems like it's never enough for Nicole. There's always something I'm doing wrong. There's always a new rule I have to follow. Because you don't respect the rules we have given you, he countered, and for the first time I heard a tone of real irritation in his voice. We asked you not to arrive before 4 o'clock in the afternoon on weekends, because those are our private mornings, and you showed up last Saturday at 2. We told you not to bring so much food every time you visit, because we're trying to cook more ourselves, and you keep showing up with 3 containers full. Every accusation was a stab. Things I had done with love, with the intention of helping, of showing affection, were now presented as violations of their privacy, as acts of unwanted intrusion. You know what, Michael? You're right about everything. I'm the one who's wrong. I'm a terrible mother who doesn't know how to respect boundaries. But let me tell you something that maybe Nicole hasn't explained to you in those books you read so much. Someday you're going to need me. You're going to want to come to my house to escape from some problem, to seek advice, to feel heard. And that day I'm going to be here for you, because that's what mothers do. But I'm not going to keep begging for scraps of your attention. I'm not going to keep apologizing for loving you too much. Mom, you're being dramatic. No, Michael, I'm being honest. And since we're talking about honesty, let me ask you something. Do you really feel that I am a burden in your life? Or is it Nicole who has convinced you of that? Another silence. This one was heavier, more loaded with meaning. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't think you're a burden. But Nicole is right that sometimes you hold on too tightly. And that makes me feel guilty when I want to do things just with her. When I want to prioritize my marriage. Then do it, son. Prioritize your marriage. I'm not going to stop you. But don't ask me to applaud while I'm being pushed out of your life. I hung up the phone before he could answer, before I could hear my voice break completely. I allowed myself to cry then, to really cry, with those deep sobs that come from the center of your chest and physically hurt. I cried for the relationship I had with my son, and which now seemed to be destroyed. I cried for the years I had dedicated to raising him, to loving him, to building a bond I believed was unbreakable. But I also cried for myself, for having been so naive, for having believed that love was enough, that shared history meant something, that blood ties were stronger than the manipulations of a woman who had only been in my son's life for 2 years. I fell asleep that night with the phone in my hand, hoping Michael would call back to apologize, to tell me he had been too harsh, that he loved me, and that nothing Nicole said could change that. But the call never came. The following days were strange, empty. I continued my normal routine, going to my job at the accounting office, having lunch with my colleagues, coming home in the evenings. But there was a constant hole in my chest, an absence that weighed more heavily with each hour that passed without news from Michael. I didn't call him, for the first time in years. I wasn't the one who sought contact first. I wanted to see how long it would take before he noticed my absence, before he noticed that something had changed between us. A week passed, then 2. My phone remained silent except for messages from friends and calls related to work. No message from Michael asking how I was. No casual call to tell me about his day. It was as if I had disappeared from his life, and he hadn't even noticed. The pain of that realization was worse than any cruel word Nicole could have said to me. It made me realize that maybe she was right about one thing. I had become dispensable in my son's life. He could move on perfectly well without me, without my visits, without my calls, without my constant presence that I thought was comforting, but which was apparently only annoying. It was in the 3rd week when something inside me changed. I was in my office reviewing some bank statements when my boss, Mrs. Reynolds, came in with a folder in her hands and a kind smile on her face. She was a woman in her 50s, direct but fair, and in the 12 years I had been working for her, we had developed a relationship that went beyond the professional. "Francis, do you have a moment?" she asked, sitting in the chair across from my desk without waiting for an answer. "I've noticed you've been different lately. Quieter, more distracted. Everything okay at home?" I tried to smile and downplay it. "Just family stuff, Mrs. Reynolds. Nothing serious." She looked at me with that penetrating gaze she used when she knew someone was lying to her. "Francis, I've known you for years. I know when something is eating you up inside. Is it your son? Michael's okay?" And then, unable to hold it in any longer, everything came out. I told her about Nicole, about the lost keys, about the phone conversation with Michael, about the 3 weeks of silence. I told her about how I felt displaced, rejected, as if everything I had built with my son over 25 years was crumbling before my eyes. Mrs. Reynolds listened in silence, nodding occasionally, without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed deeply and leaned back in her chair. "Do you know what your problem is, Francis?" she finally said. "That you spent so many years being a mother that you forgot to be a woman. You forgot that you have value beyond what you can give your son. And now that he is building his own life, you feel like you have nothing left because you put all your eggs in one basket. Her words hurt because they were true. Ever since my husband passed away, my whole life had revolved around Michael. Every decision I made, every plan I made, every dream I had, always included him. I had sacrificed opportunities to rebuild my life, to date other men, to travel, to dedicate myself to personal hobbies or interests. Everything had been for Michael, thinking about Michael. But not only that, Mrs. Reynolds continued, leaning forward. Your other problem is that you've let yourself be walked all over. That daughter-in-law of yours is manipulating you, and you're allowing it because you're afraid of losing your son. But let me tell you something, Francis. If your son allows his wife to treat you like that, if he doesn't defend the woman who raised him alone, who sacrificed everything for him, then maybe it's time for you to defend yourself. And how am I supposed to do that? I asked with a broken voice. He's my son, Mrs. Reynolds. I can't just cut him out of my life. I'm not telling you to cut him out. I'm telling you to value yourself, to stop begging for love and attention, to show him that you also have boundaries, and that when someone crosses them, there are consequences. Those words stayed with me for the rest of the day. That night, alone in my apartment, I took out the box with the house documents again. I spread them out on the dining room table and read them carefully, this time not just verifying that they were in my name, but thinking about the implications of that. Legally, that house was mine. I had every right to enter when I wanted, to make any changes I wanted, to make the decisions I deemed necessary. Michael paid a monthly installment, yes, but that didn't give him legal ownership of the property. And Nicole, no matter how much she behaved like the lady of the place, had absolutely no right to that property. It wasn't revenge I was feeling. It was something more complex, deeper. It was a need to regain some control over a situation that had completely gotten out of hand. It was the desire to show them that I wasn't a defenseless old woman whom they could push around and manipulate without consequences. I spent the following days thinking, planning. I didn't do anything impulsive. I didn't make rushed decisions. But I did start to consider options I hadn't even imagined before. What would happen if I decided to sell the house? Or if I wanted to make major modifications? Or simply if I exercised my legal right to enter the property whenever I wanted? It was the Monday of the 4th week without contact with Michael when I finally received a message from him. It was short, casual, as if the last few weeks of silence had never existed. Hi, Ma. How are you? Nicole and I are going out of town this weekend. I'm letting you know in case you need anything. I read the message 3 times, analyzing every word, every comma. There was no apology. There was no acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken for almost a month. Just a casual notice, probably sent more out of obligation than genuine concern. And the worst part was that last phrase, in case you need anything, as if I were the one who depended on him, when the reality was exactly the opposite. I replied with the same coldness he had used. I'm fine. Have a good trip. I didn't add heart emojis as I usually did. I didn't ask where they were going or how many days they would be gone. I didn't offer to water their plants or check that the house was okay. Just a polite, distant response, the kind you would give a casual acquaintance. That night, I made a decision. If they were going to be out of town for the weekend, I was going to use that time to do something I had been considering for weeks. I was going to enter that house, my house, and I was going to retrieve some things that belonged to me. I wasn't going to steal anything. I wasn't going to cause damage. I was simply going to exercise my right as the legal owner to enter my property. On Friday afternoon, when I was sure that Michael and Nicole had already left for their trip, I drove to the house. I took with me a copy of the property deed, just in case a neighbor decided to call the police upon seeing me enter. I also brought the keys that I had supposedly lost, but which I had actually found days later at the bottom of my purse, exactly where I remembered putting them. I had always suspected that Nicole had taken them that day, and then returned them to my purse without my noticing, just to create the drama of the lost keys and have an excuse to confront me. But I had no way to prove it, and frankly, I no longer cared. The important thing was that now I had access to the house. I parked my car in the driveway and walked to the front door. The neighborhood was quiet. Only the distant barking of a dog and the sound of a lawnmower at a nearby house could be heard. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door opened with a soft click. I went in and closed the door behind me. The house was silent, permeated with that particular smell that spaces have when their inhabitants are absent. I looked around the living room and felt a strange mixture of familiarity and alienation. I recognized this space. I had helped build it, but at the same time it felt foreign, transformed by Nicole's presence into something that no longer belonged to me emotionally. I walked slowly through the room, observing the changes that had been made since my last visit. The curtains I had hung had been replaced by new cream-colored ones, more modern but characterless. The family photos that used to decorate the fireplace mantel had been reduced to just two, a photo of Michael and Nicole's wedding, and another of the two of them on a beach during a vacation. The photos of Michael as a child, the photos of the two of us together, had disappeared. I went to the kitchen and opened the cabinets. There were the containers I had brought for months, piled in a corner, forgotten. Some still had dried food scraps, as if no one had bothered to wash them after emptying them. I felt a pang of pain seeing that. I had prepared those meals with love, thinking of my son, wanting to make sure he ate well. And there they were, treated like disposable garbage. I went upstairs to the second floor. There were 3 bedrooms, the main one where Michael and Nicole slept, one they used as an office, and a third that was almost empty except for some boxes. I entered the main bedroom and stopped at the threshold. The bed was perfectly made with grey sheets and white decorative pillows. There was a large dresser against one wall, with some of Nicole's beauty products neatly arranged on top. On the nightstand on the side I assumed was Michael's, there was a framed photo. I approached to look at it better and felt my heart sink. It was a photo of Nicole and Michael on their honeymoon, embracing in front of a sunset. Beautiful, romantic, perfect. But what hurt me was realizing that there was no photo of me in that entire room. It was as if I had been erased from my son's life, as if 25 years of shared history didn't deserve even a small space on his nightstand. I left that room with a weight in my chest. I went to the office and turned on the light. There was a desk with a computer, shelves with books, and a small filing cabinet in a corner. I approached the filing cabinet, with no intention of checking anything private, just observing. It was locked. That's when I noticed something on the desk. An open folder with documents that seemed important. I approached, and although I knew I shouldn't, I couldn't help but look. They were Michael and Nicole's bank statements. Apparently they had a joint account, and the numbers I saw surprised me. There were several recent charges for significant amounts. $1,200 at a furniture store, $800 at a fancy restaurant, $500 on clothes, $300 at a spa. The expenses accumulated page after page, showing a lifestyle that, frankly, seemed excessive for Michael's salary. I kept reviewing the papers, justifying my curiosity by telling myself that, as the homeowner, I had a right to know how they were managing their finances and how that might affect the monthly payment. And then I found something that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was a letter from the bank, dated 2 weeks ago. A notification that the mortgage payment for that month had been rejected due to insufficient funds. It was the first time in 3 years that Michael had failed to make the payment. The letter warned that if the situation was not regularized within the next 30 days, late charges would begin to accumulate, and eventually, a property recovery process could be initiated. I sat down in the desk chair, holding that letter with trembling hands. Was Michael having financial problems? Why hadn't he told me anything? Or was it that he didn't even know the payment had been rejected? I remembered that I was the one who received the bank notifications because the account was in my name. This letter had probably arrived in my mailbox and I hadn't seen it because I had barely checked my mail lately, too submerged in my own sadness. But then I looked at the bank statements again with all those excessive expenses, and the truth became evident. It wasn't that Michael didn't have money. It was that they were spending it on other things. Nicole was spending it on other things. While I sacrificed by saving every dollar, while they treated me like a burden and pushed me out of their lives, they were living beyond their means, buying unnecessary things, going to expensive restaurants, all instead of fulfilling the basic responsibility of paying for the house where they lived. I felt a cold anger rise in my chest. It wasn't the explosive, irrational anger of a moment of frustration. It was something more calculated, deeper. It was the indignation of someone who finally sees with total clarity how they have been used, manipulated, discarded. I took out my phone and took pictures of the documents, the bank statements, the bank letter, everything. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with that information, but some instinct told me I was going to need it. I put everything back exactly as I had found it and left that office. I went downstairs and headed towards the garage. There were some boxes piled against a wall, boxes I immediately recognized. They were mine. Boxes with my things that I had left here temporarily when I painted my apartment last year. Family photos, some books, Christmas decorations, memories from when Michael was a child. I had asked Michael several times to help me take them back to my house, but there was always an excuse. That he was too busy, that he had plans for the weekend, that they would leave it for later. Now, seeing them abandoned there in the garage, covered in dust, I realized it wasn't forgetfulness. It was contempt. It was Nicole telling him that those old things had no place in their perfect modern house. I opened one of the boxes and took out a photo frame. It was a picture of Michael at 6 years old, smiling with a missing tooth, holding a drawing he had made at school. I remembered that day perfectly. It had been his first day of school, and he was so nervous that I had to wait outside the school for the entire recess, just in case he needed me. When he came out, he ran towards me with that drawing, so proud of his creation. I put the photo frame back in the box and decided I would take these boxes home with me. They were mine, after all. And if Michael and Nicole didn't want them here, I wanted them in my apartment, where they would be appreciated, where they meant more than just old junk taking up space. I was loading the second box into my car when I heard a car park in the driveway. My heart raced. Michael and Nicole were supposed to be away all weekend. Had they forgotten something? Had they changed their plans? I put the box down on the garage floor and walked towards the entrance. Indeed, it was Michael's car. The driver's door opened and he got out, followed by Nicole from the passenger side. Both stopped dead in their tracks upon seeing me there, standing at the entrance to the house with the keys in my hand. "Mom?" Michael's voice sounded surprised and annoyed. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" Before I could answer, Nicole stepped forward, walking quickly toward me with her eyes narrowed in that expression I knew so well. The expression of someone who is about to make a scene. "Francis, this is unbelievable. You entered our house without permission while we were gone. That is a violation of private property. That's trespassing." I stood there, staring at her, feeling a strange calm come over me. For weeks I had been scared, hurt, insecure. But in that moment, with the property documents tucked into my purse and the evidence of their excessive expenses photographed on my phone, I felt more powerful than I had in months. "It's not trespassing when the house is mine, Nicole," I said in a calm but firm voice. She let out a scornful laugh. "Your house? What are you talking about? This is Michael's house, the house where my husband and I live." "It's my house," I repeated, this time pulling out my purse and extracting the green folder with the documents. "It's in my name. I bought it. I paid the down payment. The loan is in my name. And according to the letter the bank sent 2 weeks ago, this month's payment was rejected due to lack of funds." I watched the colour drain from Nicole's face. Michael quickly approached, looking confused. "What are you talking about, Mum? What letter? I made this month's payment. I transferred it like always." "It didn't reach the bank account, Michael. It was rejected. And in the meantime, as I see on the bank statements I found in your office, you have been spending thousands of dollars on furniture, restaurants, and clothes. You looked through our private papers." Nicole's voice rose an octave. "You entered our office and looked through our things. Michael, are you going to allow this? Your mother is completely out of control." But Michael was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. There was confusion there, yes, but also something else. Perhaps the beginning of an understanding, the awakening of a doubt. "Mum, is the house really in your name?" he asked softly. "Yes, Michael, it always has been. When we bought it, we put everything in my name because your credit history was too short. Don't you remember? I told you it was your house, and it is in spirit. But legally, the property is mine." Nicole took a step back, as if she had just received a physical blow. "That can't be true," Nicole said, but her voice had lost that arrogant certainty that always characterized her. "Michael, tell her that's not true. You told me this house was yours, that you had bought it with your work." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from when he was a child, and that he made when he was nervous or confused. I thought it was mine. Mum told me she was helping me with the paperwork, but that the house was mine because I paid for it every month." "And it is yours, son," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though inside I felt a whirlwind of emotions. "I never wanted to use this against you, but after how you've treated me the last few weeks, after being pushed out of your life as if I didn't matter, I think it's important for you to know the real situation. You can't do this." Nicole approached Michael and took his arm, as if claiming possession. "She's manipulating you, honey. She's using legal tricks to control you. Can't you see it? This is exactly what I told you about your mother. She can't let go of the control over your life." "I manipulate him," I repeated, feeling the anger start to filter through my calm. "Nicole, I've kept quiet for months while you subtly insulted me, while you made me feel like an intruder in my own son's life. I've put up with your comments, your absurd rules, your way of treating me as if I were a silly old woman who doesn't understand anything. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause problems between you and Michael." "Mum." Michael tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand. "No, Michael. Let me finish. I've been silent for too long. Nicole, you came into my son's life and systematically started to push me away. You turned every visit of mine into a problem, every call into an intrusion, every gesture of love into something inappropriate. You made me feel guilty for loving my son, for wanting to spend time with him, for being part of his life." "I was just protecting my marriage," Nicole replied, but her voice sounded defensive now, less sure. "You don't understand how difficult it is to build a relationship when his mother is constantly interfering." Interfering? Was I interfering when I came to visit you twice a week? When I brought food I prepared with love? When I just wanted to see my son and make sure he was okay? Yes, Nicole shouted, and for the first time, I saw her mask of composure completely crack. Yes, you were interfering, because Michael could never fully concentrate on us. He was always thinking about you, feeling guilty if he didn't call you, worrying about whether you were okay. I needed him to put me first, for our relationship to be his priority. But that was never going to happen as long as you remained so present in his life. So this was always about jealousy, I said, feeling absolute clarity. It wasn't about healthy boundaries or maturity. It was about you wanting to eliminate me from the equation because you couldn't stand that Michael loved me as well. I didn't say that. You didn't have to say it. You proved it with every action. And the worst part is that you convinced my son that I was the problem, that my love was a burden. Michael finally spoke, and his voice sounded tired, defeated. Mum, I never thought your love was a burden. Just… Nicole had some valid points about boundaries, and I wanted to make our marriage work. At the cost of your relationship with me? I asked, feeling tears start to gather in my eyes, but refusing to let them fall. Is that price worth it, Michael? Is it worth sacrificing the relationship with the woman who raised you alone, who worked overtime to pay for your school, who was there for every important moment of your life, just to keep a woman happy who sees you as her personal possession? It's not like that, Nicole protested. I love Michael. Everything I've done is because I love him and I want what's best for him. If you really loved him, I said, looking her directly in the eyes, you wouldn't try to isolate him from the people who love him too. True love doesn't require eliminating everyone else from the picture. True love is generous, it's inclusive, it's self-assured. There was a tense silence. Michael was looking at the ground, unable to hold either of our gazes. Nicole was breathing heavily, clearly trying to maintain control of her emotions. And I was standing there, in the entrance of the house I had bought for my son, feeling stronger and sadder than I had felt in years. So, what are you going to do? Nicole finally asked, and there was something new in her voice. Fear. Are you going to kick us out of the house? Is that what you want? To leave your son on the street just to prove that you have the power? No, I replied calmly. I would never do that. Because unlike you, Nicole, I do understand what it means to love someone. And loving means wanting their well-being, even when that person has hurt you. Then what? Michael's voice sounded small, vulnerable, like when he was a child and had done something wrong. What I'm going to do, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, is give you an option. You can continue living in this house, but under new conditions. You are going to regularize the overdue payment this same week. You are going to start managing your money responsibly, without excessive expenses that compromise the monthly payment. And you are going to treat me with the respect I deserve as Michael's mother and as the legal owner of this property. And if we don't accept those conditions? Nicole asked with one last flicker of defiance. Then I will exercise my legal right to recover my property. I can give you 30 days to find another place. That's what the law says when the tenant fails to meet their payment obligations. I watched Nicole pale. The reality of the situation was finally penetrating her armor of arrogance. She had no power here. She never had. All that control she thought she was exerting over the situation was an illusion, a fantasy built on incorrect assumptions. That's blackmail, she said with a trembling voice. No, it's consequences. For months you have treated me as if I didn't matter, as if I had no right to be part of my son's life. You have humiliated me, you have belittled me, you have pushed me until you thought I was gone forever. But it turns out that I do matter, and I do have rights, and I will no longer allow anyone to make me feel otherwise. Michael finally looked up and saw me, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Respect, maybe even a little admiration. Mum, I didn't know. I didn't realize how badly Nicole was treating you. Or maybe I did realize, but I didn't want to see it because it was easier to blame you. I know, son, I said softly, and I understand why you did it. When you love someone, you want to believe the best in that person. You want to think that their intentions are pure. But love shouldn't require you to sacrifice other important relationships in your life. Nicole took a step towards Michael, but he moved away slightly. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, but I noticed it. And Nicole noticed it too. I saw panic cross her face. Michael, honey, she's trying to separate us. Can't you see it? All of this is a manipulation so that you doubt me, so that you doubt us. No, Nicole. Michael's voice was firm now. My mom isn't trying to separate us. You already did that by making me choose between you from the beginning. I was just too blind to see it. What are you saying? Nicole's voice rose in pitch, bordering on hysteria. Are you saying you believe her instead of me, your wife? I'm saying, Michael took a deep breath, that I've been ignoring a lot of things because I didn't want to face them. Like the fact that every time my mum called, you rolled your eyes, or how you always found a reason to cut her visits short, or how you conveniently forgot to invite her to family events. I did that for us. No, Michael interrupted her. You did it for you, because you wanted to have total control over my life, over my relationships, over every aspect of my existence. And I let you do it because I thought that's how a good husband was supposed to be. Nicole fell silent, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. Michael, please. Nicole extended her hand toward him, but Michael didn't take it. I just wanted us to be happy together. I just wanted to build our own family without interference. Is that so wrong? It's not wrong to want to build a family, Michael replied, and there was a deep sadness in his voice. But it is wrong to destroy other relationships in the process. My mum wasn't an interference, Nicole. She is my family too, and you made me feel like I had to choose between you. I remained silent, observing this exchange. It wasn't my place to intervene now. This conversation needed to happen between the two of them, without my influence. Michael needed to reach his own conclusions, make his own decisions. I never asked you to choose, Nicole protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I just asked you to set reasonable boundaries. Reasonable boundaries don't include making my childhood photos disappear from our house, Michael said. And for the first time, I noticed a tone of anger in his voice. Reasonable boundaries don't include searching my mother's purse to take her keys and then making her feel guilty for losing them. Nicole froze. How did you know? Because I know you, Nicole, and because I've been remembering things I ignored at the time. Like that afternoon when my mum was looking for her keys and you were so calm, so sure, as if you knew exactly where they were, but you weren't going to tell her. Nicole's tears were flowing freely now. I did it for us, so she would understand that she couldn't come in and out of our house whenever she wanted. It was her house, Nicole. It was always her house. And I gave her permission to enter whenever she wanted, because she's my mother, and because I trusted her. What's not okay is that you made her feel like a criminal for exercising that right. I approached Michael then and placed my hand on his shoulder. He turned to look at me, and I saw that his eyes were also moist. Son, I didn't come here to destroy your marriage, I said softly. I came because I needed to get some of my things that are in the garage. And yes, I also came because I wanted to understand why I had been so completely displaced from your life. But the last thing I want is for you two to separate because of me. It wouldn't be because of you, Mum, Michael said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. It would be because of the decisions I made, because of the things I allowed, because of not defending the person who has loved me the most in this world. I love you too, Nicole sobbed. Michael, I love you so much. I know I made mistakes. I know I went too far. But it was all because I was afraid of losing you, of your mother being more important than me. A mother's love and a wife's love are different, Nicole, I said, looking directly at her. They don't compete with each other. They are not mutually exclusive. I never wanted to replace you in Michael's heart. I only wanted to maintain my place as his mother. But you saw it as a competition that you had to win at all costs. Nicole covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. For the first time since I met her, I saw her vulnerable, stripped of that armor of control and certainty that she always wore. And despite everything she had done to me, I felt a hint of compassion for her. Nicole, I said gently, waiting for her to lower her hands and look at me. I am not your enemy. I never was. But I'm also not going to allow you to treat me like I am. If you want to build a life with my son, you have to accept that I am part of his history, part of who he is. And that doesn't take anything away from you. It just gives you a bigger family. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can share him. Then that's a conversation you need to have with Michael, I replied, because he deserves a partner who doesn't force him to choose between his family and his marriage. He deserves someone who loves all parts of who he is, including the fact that he is Francis Rodriguez's son. Michael approached Nicole and took her hands in his. Nat, I need you to understand something. My mom is always going to be important in my life. That doesn't mean you are less important. But if you can't accept that, if you can't find a way to have a respectful relationship with her, then we have a serious problem that we need to solve. Are you giving me an ultimatum? Nicole asked with a trembling voice. I'm being honest about what I need for this marriage to work, Michael replied. It's not an ultimatum. It's a reality. And I think deep down you always knew it. That's why you worked so hard to push me away from my mom, because you knew that if I really paid attention to how you were treating her, I wouldn't agree with it. Nicole remained silent for a long moment, processing Michael's words. Finally, she wiped her tears and took a deep breath. I need time, she said with a broken voice. I need to think. It's too much to process right now. It's okay, Michael said. Take all the time you need, but in the meantime, we're going to respect the conditions my mum set. We're going to pay the overdue mortgage this week, and we're going to be more careful with our spending. Nicole nodded weakly and walked towards the car without saying anything else. She sat in the passenger seat and closed the door, looking straight ahead with a lost expression. Michael turned to me. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I made you feel unwelcome in my life. I'm sorry for everything. I hugged him then. This son who had grown so much, but who at that moment felt like my little boy again. I'm sorry about some things too, son, I replied. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner, didn't defend my place more fiercely. But I also understand that you were trying to make your marriage work. And that's important. Not at the cost of losing you, Michael said, tightening the hug. It should never have been at that cost. We stayed like that for a moment, in silence, healing a little from all the damage that had accumulated over months. When we separated, Michael had a calmer, clearer expression. What were you really doing here? He asked with a small smile. You said you came for your boxes, but I suspect there was something more. I came to regain some of my dignity, I admitted. And yes, I also came to better understand the situation. I found the bank letter by accident when I was in the office. I wasn't deliberately snooping, but when I saw it, I needed to know more. I thought I had made the payment, Michael said, running his hand through his hair again. But reviewing now, I think Nicole and I had some big expenses this month, and she must have used that money for other things, thinking we could replace it later. It wasn't intentional. It was just irresponsible. The important thing is that you resolve it, I said. I can help you with this month, if necessary. But after this, you need to have a serious conversation about your finances and your priorities. We will, Michael promised. And Mum, about the house. I didn't know it was still in your name. I thought we had made the change at some point. I was going to, I admitted. I had planned to transfer the property to your name for your 30th birthday. As a gift, as a way of saying you were fully adult and responsible for your own life. But after everything that happened, I'm glad I hadn't done it yet. Michael nodded, understanding. Do you still plan to do it? Eventually. It depends, I replied honestly. It depends on how things evolve from now on. It depends on you learning to balance your married life with your relationship with me. It depends on a lot of things. That's fair, Michael said. The following days were strange, full of expectant tension. Michael kept his word and regularized the overdue mortgage payment, using his emergency savings and drastically cutting his unnecessary expenses. He called me to confirm that the money had been deposited, and in his voice there was a mixture of shame and determination that reminded me of the responsible boy I had raised, before Nicole came to cloud his judgment. Nicole, for her part, had maintained absolute silence. She didn't call me, didn't send messages, didn't attempt any contact. Michael told me that she was processing things in her own way, going to individual therapy to work on her insecurities and her controlling behavior patterns. It was a first step, although I knew the path would be long. It was 2 weeks after the confrontation when I finally received a call from Nicole. My first instinct was not to answer, but something made me press the green button. Francis. Her voice sounded different, smaller, stripped of that arrogant certainty that had always characterized her. Do you have time to talk? I would like to see you if you're willing. We agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop, a place where neither of us would have territorial advantage. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a black coffee, watching through the window as I waited. When Nicole walked in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, dressed in jeans and a casual blouse. She looked younger, more vulnerable. She sat across from me and ordered chamomile tea. There was an awkward silence as we waited for our drinks. When they finally arrived, Nicole wrapped her hands around the hot cup and took a deep breath. I don't know where to start, she admitted, looking at the steaming liquid. I've rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, but now that you're here in front of me, all the words feel inadequate. A simple, I'm sorry, would be a good start, I said, without harshness, but without softening the truth either. I'm sorry, she said immediately, looking up to meet my eyes. I am profoundly sorry, Francis. I'm sorry I treated you the way I did. I'm sorry I tried to push you away from your son. I'm sorry for every cruel comment, every subtle humiliation, every moment when I made you feel unwelcome. The words sounded sincere, but I had learned to be cautious. Why did you do it, Nicole? That's the part I still don't understand. What did I do to you to deserve that treatment? She looked down again, and I saw tears begin to well up in her eyes. You didn't do anything. That's the point. You were perfect. You were the perfect mother who had raised the perfect man, and I come from a broken family. My father abandoned us when I was 8 years old. My mother spent the rest of my childhood being bitter, telling me never to fully trust any man, that they would all eventually leave. She paused to wipe her tears. When I met Michael, he was different from all the men I had ever known. He was kind, thoughtful, loyal, and he had this beautiful relationship with you, this connection that I had never had with my own mother. And instead of admiring that, I saw it as a threat. A threat to what? I asked gently. To my security, to my place in his life. I thought that if he loved you so much, he would eventually realize that I wasn't good enough, that he would compare our love to the love he has for you, and I would lose. So I decided to eliminate the competition, push him away from you, so he would only have me. There was a raw honesty in her words that was difficult to hear, but necessary. Nicole, a son's love for his mother and his love for his wife are not comparable. They are not in competition. They are completely different types of love. I know that now, she said. My therapist has explained it to me many times, but I had these deep wounds from my own childhood that I couldn't see it. I only saw that Michael called you when he had problems, that he sought you out for advice, that your opinion mattered to him. And in my twisted mind, that meant I wasn't enough. I took a sip of my coffee, processing her words. Part of me wanted to cling to my anger, to my justified pain. But another part, the part that had raised a son with love and compassion, understood that childhood wounds could warp the way we saw the world. I appreciate your honesty, I finally said. And I understand that you are coming from a place of pain. But understanding where your behavior comes from doesn't erase the damage you caused. Not just to me, but to Michael too. You put him in an impossible position. You made him choose between two people he loves. I know, she whispered. And if I could go back in time, I would do everything differently. But I can't. I can only try to be better from now on. And how do I know this is genuine? I asked. How do I know it's not just another attempt at manipulation, another strategy to regain control of the situation? Nicole looked me directly in the eyes. You don't know. You can't know for sure. I can only prove it to you over time, with my actions. But Francis, I swear I don't want to lose Michael. And I've realized that if I continue on the path I was on, I will lose him. He made it very clear to me that he won't sacrifice his relationship with you for me. And does that bother you? I asked, observing her reaction carefully. It scared me at first, she admitted, but then it made me reflect. If Michael is willing to defend you, he's also willing to defend what's right. He would defend me too if someone treated me badly. That loyalty he has toward you is part of what makes him a good man. And I was trying to destroy the very quality that made me fall in love with him. There was wisdom in those words, a maturity I hadn't seen in Nicole before. Therapy is helping you, I observed. Yes, she nodded. I'm learning a lot about myself, about my fears, my insecurities, my toxic behavior patterns, and I'm working on changing them. But not just for Michael, but for myself. Because I don't want to keep being that person who hurts others because of her own fears. We were silent for a moment, each lost in thought. I looked at this woman who had been my antagonist for so long and saw for the first time a complete human being, with her own scars and struggles. I'm not going to say everything is forgiven, I finally said. It wouldn't be honest on my part. I'm still healing from the pain you caused me, but I appreciate that you came to talk to me, that you were honest about your motivations. It's a start. Do you think that someday we could have a cordial relationship? Nicole asked with cautious hope in her voice. I'm not asking for us to be best friends, just mutual respect, civility, Maybe eventually something like family. I think that's possible, I replied, surprising myself with my own sincerity. But it's going to take time, and it's going to require you to demonstrate with actions, not just words, that you have truly changed. I understand, she said, and I'm willing to do that work. For Michael, and honestly for me too. I don't want to be that person I was. I don't want to look back in 10 years and realize that I destroyed something beautiful because of my own irrational fears. We finished our drinks talking about more mundane things. She told me about her job as a graphic designer, something we had never talked about before. I told her about my office and my colleagues. It was strange, almost surreal, to have a normal conversation with her after so many months of tension and hostility. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, Nicole extended her hand. I looked at it for a moment before shaking it. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement that both of us were willing to try. The following months brought gradual but significant changes. Michael started visiting me more often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Nicole. The visits with Nicole were still a little awkward, but there was a noticeable difference in her behavior. There were no longer passive-aggressive comments, no attempts to control how much time we spent together. On my 63rd birthday, they arrived together with a cake they had baked themselves. It was a delicious, crooked mess with too much frosting, but they had made it with their own hands, and that meant something. Nicole had even brought a gift, a photo album she had created with pictures of Michael through the years, many of them photos that I had shared with her. I thought it would be good to have these memories organized, she said timidly, and I wanted you to know that I recognize the history you have together, that I respect that. It was a small but significant gesture. It showed that she was trying to repair the damage she had done by eliminating those photos from their house. Michael flourished with this new balance. He looked more relaxed, more like the son I remembered before the marriage. He and Nicole also seemed stronger, paradoxically united by having faced this crisis instead of being destroyed by it. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the big confrontation, I was sitting in my apartment enjoying a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. It was Michael, alone. "Hi, Mum," he said with a smile. "Do you have time for me?" "I always have time for you, son," I replied, inviting him in. He sat down on the sofa and took an envelope out of his backpack. "I have something for you." I opened the envelope and found a check for $25,000, exactly the amount I had paid as a down payment on the house 3 years ago. "Michael, what is this?" I asked, confused. "It's the down payment you paid for the house. Nicole and I have been saving, cutting expenses, being much more responsible with our money, and we want to give you back what you initially invested. It's not fair that you carried that burden alone." I felt tears begin to well up in my eyes. "Son, I don't need you to give me that money back. I gave it with love, as a gift for you." "I know, Mum, but we want to do it anyway, because we also want to ask you for something." "What is it?" "We want you to transfer the house to my name, officially. Not because we're afraid you'll use it against us, but because it's time for me to take on that responsibility completely. It's time for me to grow up and be the real owner of my own life." I looked at the check in my hands, then at my son, and finally nodded. "All right. I'll call my lawyer next week and we'll start the transfer process." Michael hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mum, for everything, for buying the house, for not giving up on me, for teaching me what unconditional love means." "Thank you," I replied, "for finally seeing me, for defending me, for finding the balance we all needed." That night, after Michael left, I sat on my balcony looking at the illuminated city. I thought about all the pain I had gone through, the tears shed, the sleepless nights, wondering if I had lost my son forever. But I also thought about the strength I had discovered within myself, the dignity I had regained by refusing to be walked all over anymore. I had learned that love doesn't require sacrificing your self-worth, that defending your boundaries doesn't make you less loving, that sometimes the greatest demonstration of love is teaching others how they should treat you. The house, that property I had bought with so much sacrifice and love, would finally be transferred to Michael's name. But the lesson we had learned together, that couldn't be transferred with any legal document. That lesson about respect, about family, about the balance between filial love and marital love, that would live in us forever. And as the cool night wind caressed my face, I smiled, because I had won something much more valuable than a house or a legal document. I had won my dignity back. I had regained my place in my son's life. And I had demonstrated both to Nicole and to myself that a mother who loves fiercely can also defend herself fiercely. The keys that Nicole had asked me why I needed no longer mattered, because I had never needed physical keys to have a place in my son's heart. That place had always been mine, and now we all knew it.